At the recent 2023 UN summit, leaders from Africa took on a new role. Instead of just following policies, they became the ones making policies. They talked about the international system, the United Nations, and the need for changes to keep the world stable. The president of Ghana criticized the UN as an unfair organization and called for justice and democracy. It was a big moment, and there was more to come. When President Felix Tshisekedi of the Democratic Republic of the Congo spoke, he announced an order telling the United Nations peacekeeping forces to leave Congo. Yes, the president of the Democratic Republic of the Congo told the UN peacekeepers to go away. One would ask, why did he do this, or what did he discover that made him kick out these peacekeeping forces? Well, for many years, the United Nations, UN, has been used by Western countries to intervene in African nations. A typical example is the United States using the UN to ask for permission to go into countries like Iraq, Libya, and Afghanistan. Since Western powers can't invade countries all the time, they came under the guise of UN peacekeeping missions. These missions send troops to countries, saying it's to make peace and stop threats. But in reality, they often want to access important places in countries with lots of resources. This is why in some African countries, where France couldn't keep its troops and control them, the UN sent peacekeeping forces. These forces stayed there for a long time, not stopping rebellions or the security challenges, but delaying them so they could use the country's resources. So, President Felix Tshisekedi of the Democratic Republic of the Congo gave a clear order to speed up the removal of a United Nations peacekeeping group called MONUSCO. He made this announcement at the United Nations General Assembly to show that African countries can make decisions on their own. They don't need permission from the United Nations or any other country to send UN peacekeepers out of their land. He said they should start leaving Congo this December, and everything must be finished by December 2024. MONUSCO, which stands for United Nations Organization Stabilization Mission, began in 2010 after a previous UN mission tried to deal with problems in the eastern region. This region is where different armed groups fight for control of land and valuable things like minerals. However, lately, people have criticized MONUSCO a lot because they think it's not doing a good job of protecting ordinary people from violence. This led to protests, and some of them turned very dangerous, with many people getting hurt or killed. This is when people question what the United Nations is really doing. Peacekeeping forces are supposed to protect civilians, not harm them, when they want these forces to leave their country. President Tshisekedi shared his concerns at the UN General Assembly, saying it's sad that peacekeeping missions have been in place for over 25 years, but haven't been able to stop rebellions and conflicts effectively. He's right, because the main goal of UN peacekeepers has never been to stop armed conflicts. They are sent to certain countries where there are valuable resources. That's why there are serious claims, supported by reports, that UN peacekeepers in Congo have been involved in hurting the local population and illegally moving gold out of the country. Looking at the history of UN peacekeeping missions in Africa, it's clear that they haven't been very effective. Since 1960, Africa has had more than 30 UN peacekeeping missions, more than any other region. This is because African countries have valuable resources, and Western countries want to control them. There's a concerning problem with these peacekeeping missions. Sometimes the peacekeepers themselves become part of the issue, with reports of them committing sexual and other human rights abuses. This has caused a lot of criticism and embarrassment for Western countries. Wherever they go, they often misuse their power, especially by exploiting women sexually. Right now, there are more than 50,000 troops from Africa doing UN peacekeeping jobs, and many more are working on missions run by local groups. Peacekeepers have been heavily criticized for not taking action when it's needed most. A report from 2014 showed that peacekeepers around the world only stepped in to help civilians in danger in 1 out of every 5 cases, and they often didn't use force when it was necessary. An internal review found that peacekeeping staff had low levels of ethics and integrity and didn't face enough consequences for their wrongdoing. Even though the UN has been looking into these allegations more in recent years, very few have led to prosecutions, and none have ended in public convictions because UN peacekeepers can't be prosecuted in the countries they're sent to. Their home countries are responsible for taking legal action against them. Looking at the Democratic Republic of Congo, MONUSCO was initially created to oversee the peace process during the Second Congo War. Later, its focus expanded to address other conflicts like the Ituri conflict, the Kivu conflict, and the Dongo conflict. Before 2010, it was called the United Nations Mission in the Democratic Republic of Congo, or MONUSCO. In the 1990s, the UN authorized the deployment of up to 90 UN peacekeeping officers, which has now increased to over 20,000. This increase in the number of officers shows how the UN strategically increased its presence to control the country. Sadly, even after being in Congo for over 20 years, the UN peacekeepers didn't bring the situation under control. People started wondering what they were really doing there if they couldn't do their job properly. MONUSCO cost $1 billion each year, and it clearly failed. That's why the president of the Democratic Republic of the Congo told them to leave. The Congolese government has had doubts about MONUSCO for a while, and has been asking them to leave since 2010. Protests have also erupted, with people demanding the UN go because they think they failed to protect civilians. There have been incidents where UN peacekeepers fired at crowds, making tensions worse and leading to more calls for the mission to leave. Consent is an important principle for UN peace operations. It relies on the approval of the host government. But it should also focus on the safety, dignity, and protection of local people. International obligations should come from the UN Charter's commitment to people's well-being, not just state sovereignty. The usual way peace operations work is through mediation, monitoring ceasefires, and making peace agreements happen. But the missions in the Democratic Republic of Congo, Mali, and the Central African Republic are different. They don't have the host state's approval and don't include everyone. This creates tension, not just between the host state and UN peacekeepers, but also between the local people and peacekeepers. This makes it impossible to fight terrorism and rebellion because the country and the forces don't have the same goals as the host countries were told. They seem to be buying time to secure their home country's interests, which are to exploit the host country's resources. So the president of the Democratic Republic of the Congo finally told the UN peacekeepers to leave. They've been there for more than 25 years, and they didn't do much. But when you consider the human rights abuses, resource exploitation, and illegal activities they were involved in, it was a waste of time. The president said, "It's not realistic to expect that MONUSCO will bring stability and peace to Congo." He believes it's time for African countries to take matters into their own hands and deal with their own problems. After seeing how MONUSCO, led by Western countries, spent decades in the Congo and didn't achieve much, many African countries now understand that it was just an illusion. It seems there was no other choice but to order UN peacekeepers to leave. They caused harm to civilians, and anti-MONUSCO feelings were growing. The eastern part of the Democratic Republic of the Congo has been dealing with security problems for over 30 years. People are now protesting to demand that MONUSCO leave because they think the mission's way of keeping peace hasn't worked. MONUSCO was initially sent to the DRC to bring peace, protect civilians, ensure safe elections, and fight rebel groups. However, after almost 2 decades, the opposite has happened. There are more armed groups, people are still in danger, and innocent lives are lost even with MONUSCO there. The mission's main job was to prevent this situation, but it hasn't done it well and has proven ineffective. As violence keeps getting worse, many people are leaving their homes to find safety, showing that the mission has failed. Local communities often have a tense relationship with MONUSCO because they feel the mission hasn't protected them enough. When people have protested and demanded help, MONUSCO has sometimes used violence against them. These protests have been driven by ongoing security issues and the belief that MONUSCO should have seen the problems coming and stopped them without harming people. Plans have been made to get rid of MONUSCO, and the evacuation will start in December this year. Other African countries might also want to remove UN peacekeepers and missions, which don't seem to be useful. Instead, there's growing interest in Africa to create their own organization to handle rebellions and keep peace, which is what the UN peacekeepers were supposed to do but didn't. Share your thoughts on whether African countries should remove UN peacekeepers or not. Thank you for watching. I would like to take a moment to express our sincere gratitude for your continued support. Your viewership inspires us to create engaging content that we hope you find enjoyable and informative. For the new viewers, we kindly ask you to subscribe to our channel and click the notification bell icon to stay updated with our latest uploads. Your subscription allows us to reach a larger audience and bring you more quality content.